Last time we met, which was 2 weeks ago, although it seems more like a month, I spoke about the gift of our humanity, the extraordinary gift and glorious mystery of the human person as God made us, a unity of body and soul, yet distinct as male and female. We considered the human person with a profound attitude of thankfulness, awe, and gift, as we discovered how God in His divine wisdom and love made us the way we are, and how as male and female we were made for each other, both as spouses for those called to the vocation of marriage, but also as a community of persons. As male and female, we complement and complete each other. Tonight we're going to consider the human person as male and female in greater detail, and how the invisible mystery of God is revealed visibly in the femininity of the woman and the masculinity of the man. Feminine genius is what St. John Paul the Great called those characteristics principally found in the femininity of women. And although St. John Paul the Great didn't say so explicitly, we can also presume a similar genius exists for masculinity, the masculine genius. It's important to have clarity here. This is not to say that only men exhibit characteristics identified as masculine genius, and only women exhibit characteristics identified with feminine genius. Rather, these are characteristics that a particular sex is predisposed to, in the main, if you will. Exceptions in particular individuals, male and female, will not be hard to find. Greg Bottaro described these respective geniuses well in an article he wrote. He defined masculine genius as the set of characteristics a well-formed man displays with particular proclivity due to his capacity for fatherhood. Feminine genius, correspondingly, is the set of characteristics a well-formed woman displays with particular proclivity due to her capacity for motherhood. It's worth noting that it is the capacity for fatherhood and motherhood that governs the proclivity or disposition that a particular to have a particular masculine or feminine characteristic. And it is in this way that the human body makes visible the invisible mystery of God. Now, in order that the praiseworthy and noble custom of ladies first might not be relegated to oblivion, as a gentleman, I'll start with the female genius. The four main characteristics that constitute feminine genius are receptivity, sensitivity, generosity, and maternity. Mary Jo Anderson, in an article on feminine genius, notes that the Blessed Virgin Mary's fiat is the most sublime example of receptivity, unblemished by original sin. Receptivity is the capacity and the willingness to receive, to be open to someone else. A woman's very body is made to be receptive, yes, but to be fully feminine, her heart and spirit must be receptive as well. Receptivity, Anderson writes, is the foundation of all the other feminine attributes. The woman finds in each person she encounters something unrepeatable, something wondrous. A woman's gift of self, her openness to receive, is a gift for all mankind. And this receptivity is at the heart of the next characteristic of her genius, her sensitivity. A woman's capacity for life within her makes her ever attentive to the inner life of others, especially with regard to life within her. Even before the world knows this child, she is sensitive to its needs and has hopes for its future. St. John Paul the Great wrote in his apostolic letter on the dignity and vocation of women, quote, "This unique contact with the new human being developing within her gives rise to an attitude towards human beings, not only towards her child, but every human being, which profoundly marks the woman's character," unquote. Perhaps this unique sensitivity flows in part from the circumstances of creation. While Adam's first experience of his own existence was that of loneliness, Eve's horizon was different right from the start. From the first moment of her own reality, she saw herself in relation to someone else. In the beginning, it was Adam who experienced original solitude. Eve was always in relationship with someone else. And as with sensitivity, so too a woman's predisposition for generosity is tied to her receptivity. In this generosity, a woman makes a gift of herself, not only to her family, but also to her community and her profession. Our Lord himself entrusted to the generous heart of women to provide for his material needs during his 3-year ministry. In their capacity for motherhood, women naturally nurture. In this, they give of themselves in so many ways, not the least of which is with infants at the breast, whereby the woman gives of her very body as well. The final characteristic of feminine genius is maternity. Whereas men are more comfortable with the external and the abstract, hence the many and varied theories that men want to develop, woman, says St. John Paul the Great, is endowed with a particular capacity for accepting the human being in its concrete form, unquote. And this manifests itself most directly in the transmission of life, of course. But Mary Ann Glendon, a wife, mother, and professor of law at Harvard University, is quoted by Anderson as reminding women that they are also a transformative presence in the culture. It is the hallmark of Catholic Christianity that we do not have the option to turn our backs on a sinful world. We're not allowed, she continues, to throw up our hands and retreat into private life. For the shaping of culture comes down to the nurture and education of human beings one by one. And women as mothers, teachers, and in countless other ways have long played a decisive role in the transmission of culture. A woman's ability to connect with a person, whether part of their family or not, in a genuine and meaningful way, often results in a transformative relationship. Now let's turn to masculine genius. God created Adam from the dust of the earth, but also breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Genesis 2, verse 7. So Adam was created in original solitude, as we would say in the terminology of the theology of the body. But God knew it was not good for man to be alone, so he created all the animals which Adam named and categorized. And in all this, Adam, after examining all that God had created, realized that no one had a body or rational soul like his. And he also knew that he was therefore incomplete, and alone. He was the only one of his kind. Original solitude. Until God, to Adam's great delight, made Eve, that is. Now, we don't know how long Adam remained in solitude, but perhaps this is where the masculine tendency to focus on the external, to desire primacy over his surroundings, and for thinking in the abstract gained prominence. In any case, the four main characteristics that constitute masculine genius are procreation, primacy, provision, and protection. Again, Greg Bottaro, in an article about masculine genius, says that with regard to procreation, a woman's focus is inward. The baby is developing within her body, after all. And man, on the other hand, is in both the conjugal act and subsequently, is directed outward, outside himself. A man is not concerned about what is happening moment by moment with the developing child because it's not happening inside his body. Instead, his outward focus enables him to ensure the environment outside and around the child is safe. A woman's body is made to make human bodies inside of her. A man's body is made to make human bodies outside of him. The woman serves the child in proximity, while the man serves the child from a distance. Now, to me anyway, this seems to be one of those things that, once said, is patently obvious, but until it is said, remains strangely unknown. I just couldn't think about how the wondrous complementarity of man and woman was all in God's plan after reading this article. Of all the characteristics of masculine genius, primacy will be the one that is most misunderstood by men and women alike. And in fairness, primacy is a vague term. That, coupled with the fact that our culture is hypersensitive and suspicious about anyone claiming primacy over anyone or anything, makes this rather challenging. But it's really quite simple. The characteristic of primacy with respect to relationships flows from the context of love. That is, part of the masculine genius means taking the initiative with respect to acts of love and service to others. Another way of putting this is men are to love as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Now, St. Paul said with respect to husbands and wives, but the same spirit holds with relationships outside the family. With respect to nature or to the external world, this characteristic again flows from Genesis, where God told man to subdue the earth and exercise dominion over all living things. And this dominion manifests itself most often in the next characteristic of masculine genius, which is provision. In an article from The Art of Manliness, provision is defined as the ability to tame nature, to turn chaos into order, to take the raw materials of life and transform them into something of value. The masculine proclivity to compete, to build, to create and provide flows directly from this. And Greg Bottaro provides the following statistics to support this. He cites how, regardless of cultural influence, boys spend 65% of their free time in competitive activity versus 35% for girls. And moreover, boys will use ordinary domestic items as tools or weapons 6 times more often than girls. Christina Ehrlich relates a story about her 2-year-old son that more than captures the final masculine genius characteristic of protection in an article she wrote called A Mother's Glimpse of the Masculine Genius. Christina, her 2-year-old son, and a friend were about to walk out of a store into a very large parking lot. Now, Christina was carrying a large picture her friend, who was about 8 months pregnant, had bought. And she was worried that her son might break away and sprint through the busy parking lot as he often tried to do, even with her pregnant friend holding his hand. And so she thought a moment. And then, just before walking out of the store, she set down the picture, dropped down to his eye level, and said to her son, "Mommy needs your help. My friend has a big baby in her belly, so she has to walk very slowly. And I have to carry this big picture, and I need you to help her to get to the car safely. Can you hold her hand and walk with her to keep her safe?" A deeply serious look came over his face, and he nodded solemnly. His entire demeanor shifted in that moment, she said. My son took my friend's hand and with great care and solicitude walked slowly with her through the parking lot to her van. He escorted her as if it were his sworn duty. This event, Christina continued, is a particular instance of something which seemed to be innate, a part of his nature as a man, albeit only a 2-year-old man. My son's service, she continued, to another person brought out something in him that I had not witnessed before, but that seemed to be already there. St. John Paul the Great wrote in Gaudium et Spes, quote, "Man cannot find himself except through a sincere gift of himself," unquote. Male or female, this is true for each one of us. This is where each one of us, man or woman, finds our ultimate fulfillment in the gift of ourselves. As male and female, our respective masculine or feminine genius is a principal mode or way in which we do that. God made us this way on purpose. We complement and complete each other. And as King David affirmed in Psalm 139, we are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. Thanks be to God.